Let me introduce to you Ian Hill from Duke University, and he's here to talk to you about Mente.
It began with a donut, a freshly fried, mouth-watering Krispy Kreme. It was their appeal that drove me to wake up at 6 a.m. sharp every day for 3 months straight. 15 minutes after 6, I'd be on my bike, pedaling as fast as I could through Wisconsin winter. My friend would be waiting, his rusty old Schwinn at the ready, and we'd bike the 5 miles of farmland to Quick Trip, load our packs with dozens of Glazers, and be at school by 7. A horde of 11-year-olds would be waiting for us at the door. $1 a donut, and we were out of stock by 7:15. Just enough time to pocket the proceeds and make it to class. That was my first business, and we made out like bandits. You see, we had recognized a supply and demand problem that boiled down to pure logistics. 6th graders are at the mercy of cafeteria food, and they don't carry Glazers at DC Everest Middle School. Instead of spending an hour on the bus, we spent the same amount of time riding our bikes to pick up and deliver donuts to our peers. Not only were we heroes, but the ROI was 3x and the opportunity cost negligible. With the central Wisconsin donut resale market in my pocket at age 11, it's not surprising that I'm here today. While my first venture might all have been just to spite my mother, a health nutrition educator, and most of the proceeds went to building model rockets with my brother in the backyard, the joy of selling donuts lit a spark that has developed into a burning passion for innovation in entrepreneurship. My name is Ian Hill. I'm a PhD candidate at Duke University and co-founder of Mente. I wear both of those hats to further a singular mission, to revolutionize the healthcare supply chain. So how did I go from donuts to healthcare? Well, I realized the power of entrepreneurship is a vehicle to create sustainable change, and healthcare needs change. After graduating with a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from University of Wisconsin, I was accepted into a PhD program at Duke University. My only career goal at that point was to achieve a position where I could bring an idea from conception all the way to productization. And the Brain Tool Laboratory enabled that goal. Headed by Dr. Patrick Codd, the BTL exposes engineers to clinical environments to drive innovative solutions to problems in healthcare. The first month of my studies was spent almost entirely in scrubs, shadowing Pat through his neurosurgery practice. While most first-time observers of surgery focus on the actions of the surgeon, it was everything supporting the surgeon that captivated me. Messes of cords, equipment, and instruments were strewn across tables. Nurses buzzed around searching for requested instrumentation, and if a search was unsuccessful, they would leave the room, only to reappear minutes later with an entirely new tray of instruments. They'd rip the top off, hoping to find the requested instrument, only to realize it was missing or another instrument was contaminated. The whole tray would then get carted out and the search continued. At this point, the tension in the room is palpable because the surgeon is literally waiting with a patient's life in their hands, a life that is counted in minutes, not years. It astounded me that the most precise expression of human action could be surrounded by such a chaotic and haphazard support system. There was no way in my mind that the chaos of this supply chain could accurately provide for the needs of the surgical team. Trying to understand, I surveyed the literature, and what I found reaffirmed what I had witnessed firsthand. 88% of surgeries are delayed. 16% of surgeries are extended due to equipment error. And most astounding, 80%, that's 80% of instruments supplied in an operating room are not used. Why would hospitals spend countless dollars sterilizing, processing, maintaining, and replacing expensive instruments that are not even needed by the people who are supposed to be using them? After hundreds of interviews with stakeholders at all levels of Duke University Hospital, I found my answer. Data. Not just data, but the right data. Data that describes which instruments are used in an operation. Over the following year, I secured grant funding, designed, built, and piloted a system for intraoperative surgical instrument tracking, and refined the system until it could be applied to any surgery without impacting surgical workflow. This is the result. A radio frequency identification system that gathers a time history of instrument use throughout a surgery. RFID tags are seamlessly embedded in surgical instruments, and antennas are placed under drapes to view the surgical site. Throughout the surgery, an RFID reader collects and uploads data to a database for analysis. The system is automated, does not have a user interface, and it simply collects data in the background of surgeries. This platform technology enables a novel data stream that has incredible potential. The plot shown here is a timeline from a CMC arthroplasty operation, or wrist surgery. As the surgeon progresses through surgery, different instruments enter and exit the surgical site, and our system reads them. Each circle is a read. This data can be used to enhance surgical education, enable predictive scheduling, optimize instrument supplies, provide nurses with a forecast of instrument use during surgeries, and be leveraged to train neural networks to localize instruments and analyze surgeon movement. When I saw this result, I recognized the value it could provide to health centers, but not as a research project within Duke. I needed to build products. I needed to build a company, and I recognized I couldn't do it alone. So I called my brother, who previously ran a medical device startup, and I convinced him to help me build Mente. My brother and I have always worked incredibly well together. From building all manner of dangerous contraptions in our backyard as kids to now building the future of surgical supply management, we work hard, learn quickly, and support each other. With our engineering skill sets and Dr. Codd's clinical background, our founding team knows both the problem and the solution space really well. We also recognize that we have less experience in the areas of business development, so we have sought out several advisors to help guide us. One of the things I am most proud of is that we created our first job this year. We stole Eric Sipsma from Amazon. He's an incredibly talented software engineer and single-handedly developed a solution that integrates into hospital IT systems. Now, with our incredible team and a vision for leveraging this new data stream, we recognize that in order to be successful, we need to focus our efforts on the highest impact application. So in September, I took part in an expo event that enabled 5-minute meetings with 30 hospital administrators from around the US. In these meetings, I gauged the relative interest of each potential customer in each of our products. While all of their reactions were positive, they favored the tray optimization solution over the others. Not only did I achieve a focused direction for subsequent development, but we are continuing conversations with 11 of the attendees as potential customers. I also made the strategic decision to keep the development of the movement analysis project within Duke. The localization technology for that application has a much higher technical risk and a longer commercialization horizon. Instead of burdening Mente with the cost of development and patent protection, I'm actively pursuing this aspect in my PhD research. If successful, localization of instruments will enable analyses of surgeon movement and can be leveraged for many commercial applications under a future license agreement. Focusing on our first product, we demonstrate 50% of instruments supplied to the OR could be eliminated. With that reduction, instrument tray optimization achieves $220 of direct to margin savings per surgery, which stands to save an academic medical center about $7.5 million annually and only costs around $120,000 for us to implement. With a value to cost ratio of above 60 and intense interest from stakeholders across Duke and other health centers, we knew we could achieve a sustainable offering that could begin to address an $8.5 billion US market. More importantly, it could serve as our starting place for bringing about the operating room of the future, an OR where necessary supplies are predicted, prepared, and delivered exactly when they are needed. While tray optimization is a small step towards that overarching goal, our first product provides a foundation for achieving that vision. Since then, we have achieved 3 key milestones in marketing our first product. The first was building a tag attachment robot. The robot automates the attachment of tags to instruments and allows us to market our solution more broadly at lower cost. The second achievement was developing a network architecture and accompanying software that integrates with hospital-side systems. And the third achievement was securing Duke as our first paying customer. Pilot data was pivotal in making our first sale. By measuring instrument use with the system in 43 surgeries over 3 surgical service lines, we were able to reduce trays by 50%. In cases with the reduced trays, none of the surgeons requested any of the eliminated instruments, and the reduced trays are still being used today. Setup time with the reduced instrument supply decreased by 1/4, and the weight of instrument trays decreased by 1/3. Of the 3 surgeons and 6 nurses who interacted with the RFID system, all found the RFID tags and system to be unobtrusive to surgical workflow. But most importantly, we ensured that the surgeon had exactly what they needed. With these positive results, many clinical advocates acted as proponents throughout the purchasing process, and we were able to convert our pilot studies into a larger deployment. With their support, we were approved by Duke's Enterprise Operations Committee to optimize 57 trays across transplant and colorectal services for $240,000. After the approval, we worked extensively with Duke's IT team to fit our software to their requirements and are now in our final stage of contracting. By working through our first sale, we learned that institutional purchases are time-consuming and require strong internal support. It became clear that if we were going to sell to hospitals, we would need to develop an offering at a low enough cost to avoid committee approval and eliminate the need for IT integration. So we developed a starter package. Instead of tagging the hospital's instruments, we purchase and tag our own instruments. That way, medical centers can select a tray they want optimized. We can configure our tag tray to match theirs and track our instruments in their surgeries. After only 10 surgeries per surgeon stakeholder, we provide a recommendation to the customer specifying the instruments to supply in their tray. For a lifetime cost to Mente of just over $10,000, we can deliver 50 times that in lifetime benefit to the hospital. This model allows us to validate our solution for new customers at a low cost, convert clinical stakeholders into proponents of our solution, and collect data that facilitates a follow-on institutional sale. With a large implementation underway at Duke, a scalable minimum viable product offering to approach follow-on customers, and data to develop follow-on products, we see our primary goal for the next 3 years as developing and implementing new products that prove the importance of our novel data stream, a data stream that will advance the healthcare supply chain from reactive to predictive. As much as I've evolved since selling donuts as a kid, I'm still absolutely emboldened to solve yet another logistics problem and improve an inefficient supply chain, this time through a window into the operating room.
Good job, Ian.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, I will push it out to the judges for questions.
Hey, Ian. Great presentation. So you are still full-time pursuing the PhD. Your brother's taking kind of the role as CEO. Could you elaborate on what's the risk to you that you've taken so far or are taking if this business doesn't work out?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So the risk to me is mostly in delaying my PhD studies, but at this point I've tried to mitigate that risk as much as possible just by dividing and conquering. So luckily for me, I can apply learnings across roles pretty effectively. The things I'm developing as part of my PhD are closely related to the things I'm pursuing under Mente. And the way I kind of segmented that work is to try to solve the really, really risky things within the university still, where I can do it under institutional funding and grant funding, and then to actually translate the technologies that are less risky and more commercially applicable immediately. But I'd see the biggest risk to me being delaying my graduation as a PhD student and financially in Mente. I mean, I've invested 3 years of my life in it, so it's there's an investment there as well.
For sure. Thank you.
I think are the biggest obstacles to hospitals adopting your solution?
Yeah, I think with this new starter package, we've kind of identified it and worked to mitigate the biggest ones. So the biggest ones are big institutional purchases have to go through a rigorous review. And that hits a lot of desks. So like we have met with all of the higher ups at Duke, and eventually you get on the CFO's desk and it's his job to figure out, you know, is this financially viable? But it also hits the information security officer's desk. And so those two checkpoints really need to come out to be perfect. For us, the CFO desk one is pretty easy because this is direct to margin savings, and the hospital doesn't actually have a huge budget. So this reflects like a sizable percent for them if we did implement. But for the information security office, we're a young company. Like we don't have a lot of the certifications that other bigger companies have. And so for that one, it was really working with Duke Health Technology Services to come up with an architecture that creates a way to exchange data that really minimizes the amount of PHI. Like we don't collect any PHI at this point. It's all internal to Duke, and we just read our instruments and tell them what's used or what's not used.
Ian, first of all, very thorough presentation, well prepared. Couple
Thank
of
you.
questions specific to surgery. Having had a little experience with that myself, there is an artistry to the science of surgery. And so I wonder, is there a preordained data collection segment prior to implementing in any given hospital? Because you may have a neurosurgeon who likes to use tools that other neurosurgeons whose data you've collected have not used predominantly. So I'm questioning about that data gathering piece. And then secondly, how do you reduce the near-term concern? I mean, do you have a tray of others that are close by, like right out in the hallway?
Yeah, so great question. So for the first one, we measure the use of every surgeon. So, if there's a tray that's used by, 5 surgeons, we measure their use in their surgeries. And so we can optimize a tray for however many surgeons are using it. We just look at all their instrument use and cross-list it with all the other instrument use and say, 90% of the time, all of your surgeons aren't using this. It might be more cost-effective to supply it in a peel pack. So that's one way where we mitigate that risk of, hey, a surgeon actually does need this in a really low probability case. But the other way is that the way we implement this is to work with clinical collaborators. So, once we have a list of instruments that we see as surgeons using all the time, we don't just change the trays without telling the surgeons. It's more about working with the surgeons to make sure that we're not missing anything. And then all this does is facilitate that discussion so that, surgeons who are really ingrained in old practices can see oh, this is the cost effect of me requiring 300 instruments per case when I only use 20.
Follow-up question, I guess. That was an impressive cost savings number that you demonstrated. Is that primarily time in surgery, or is that instrument driven?
No, it's driven by the processing cost mostly. The biggest portion of that cost is from the reprocessing that happens in sterile processing, which I know you've spent quite a bit of time in the hospital, so you for sure know that those departments are overburdened. The reason there is so much instrument error up in the operating room is because it's like I Love Lucy. Like the chocolates just keep coming and they're not slowing down. So, instrument processing techs can't finish the processing of all these instruments in the time it takes for a surgeon to request the next ones, especially when they open 7 trays because 6 of them are contaminated. Then the processing technicians have to clean 7 trays. So it's kind of a snowballing problem, but there is an OR time savings cost, but we minimize that to only be direct savings. So, we looked at salaries and we looked at the cost of, we didn't take into consideration opportunity cost or anything like that.
Thank you.
Thank you all for judging.
Yeah, Ian, what's your favorite part of the business and what you're doing?
I really like the future applications of this data. Just being able to look at this and say, we can predict what instruments the surgeon is going to use next is so exciting to me, because it just means, we're kind of setting a foundation here for a totally different way surgery will be performed in the future. I think if we can predict what they're going to use, maybe we could just supply based on use instead of actually having instrument trays at all. Why do we need these pre-configured sets if we know, minute 39 of a CMC arthroplasty operation, Dr. Codd is going to need this instrument. So I think that's what's exciting to me. But
Cool.
Ashlyn, did you have a question?
I don't. I think your presentation was very impressive. Thank you.
thank you so much.